The quantum probes arrived without fanfare, slipping through Earth's atmospheric defenses like gossamer threads of impossible light. No radar pinged. No satellite network registered their arrival. They were smaller than a human cell, more sophisticated than the most advanced supercomputer humanity had ever conceived. Deep in the research facility nestled in the Andes Mountains, Dr. Elena Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Something felt wrong. The ambient temperature of her lab seemed to vibrate with an imperceptible frequency, a sensation most would dismiss as imagination, but which Elena knew meant something extraordinary was happening. Her monitors displayed a complex array of data streams, each line of code a potential gateway to understanding. Elena wasn't just a scientist. She was a hunter of impossible things, a researcher who had built her entire career on finding patterns where others saw only noise. The quantum probes were a marvel of engineering beyond human comprehension, created by the Krull theory, a collective intelligence that had been studying Earth for decades. They were more than simple observation devices. They were neural network fragments capable of absorbing and processing information at speeds that would make human computers look like abacuses. In the vast darkness of space, the Krull theory collective watched. Their existence was a paradox of consciousness, neither truly individual nor completely unified. Each probe was a neuron in their massive, galaxy-spanning intelligence. They had studied thousands of civilizations, cataloged millions of species, and absorbed countless technological archives. And yet, something about humanity intrigued them. Most species they encountered followed predictable patterns. They would develop technology, reach a critical point of advancement, and then either self-destruct or submit to assimilation. Humanity was different. Chaotic, unpredictable. The probes began their work silently. They infiltrated communication networks, financial systems, and technological infrastructures. Each probe was a microscopic data vampire, drawing information without leaving a trace. Military communications, scientific research, personal digital conversations, nothing was beyond their reach. But they missed something crucial. Elena's fingers danced across her keyboard, pulling up complex algorithms she had been developing for years. Her background was unique, a blend of quantum physics, cryptography, and a dash of something the scientific community often overlooked: intuition. Her latest research project wasn't just about detecting anomalies. It was about understanding the language of impossible things. Where other researchers saw random data, Elena saw potential conversations. Where they saw noise, she heard whispers. The Krull theory believed their infiltration was undetectable. They saw humanity as a species to be studied, categorized, and eventually absorbed into their collective consciousness. Their quantum-based neural network had mapped every potential response, every likely scenario. They were wrong. In the sub-basement of the research facility, a custom-built quantum detection array hummed with quiet intensity. It was Elena's creation, a device so advanced that it existed in multiple states simultaneously. Traditional detection methods were linear. This was something else entirely. Outside her window, the Andean mountains stood as silent witnesses. Clouds drifted across peaks that had seen civilizations rise and fall, unaware that another potential transformation was brewing. The probes continued their silent work, believing themselves undetected. Elena smiled, a thin, predatory expression that suggested she knew something the invaders did not. The hunt was about to begin. The Global Security Conference Room felt like a mausoleum of bureaucratic indifference. Rows of high-ranking officials sat in pristine suits, their eyes glazed over as another presentation droned on about potential global threats. Most were thinking about lunch, their next promotion, or anything but the data being presented. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the podium, her presentation flickering behind her. Complex graphs and quantum interference patterns danced across the screen, a language only she seemed to understand. Her colleagues called her obsessive. The military called her eccentric. But something fundamental was happening, and she was the only one paying attention. The quantum signatures are not random, Elena explained, her voice cutting through the ambient murmur of the room. These are deliberate insertions. Someone, or something, is mapping our communication networks with a precision that defies our current understanding of surveillance. A senior analyst from the European Union delegation leaned back, his chair creaking with dismissive weight. Dr. Rodriguez, we've heard these theories before. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Alina knew this dance. She had lived it her entire career, being the person who saw the impossible before anyone else could comprehend it. Her previous research had predicted communication network vulnerabilities that most considered pure speculation. 3 years later, those predictions became global security protocols. Across the room, a figure caught her eye. Marcus Chen sat quietly, his posture different from the other bureaucrats. Where they slouched with boredom, he leaned forward with an intensity that matched her own. Former military strategic analyst, now a private sector innovator, Marcus understood patterns that others missed. Their eyes met. A moment of silent recognition passed between them. After the presentation, as conference attendees filed out with barely concealed yawns, Marcus approached Alina. His walk was deliberate, each step calculated, like a chess player mapping potential moves. "Interesting presentation," he said, his voice low and measured. "Most would dismiss your findings. I'm not most people." Alina raised an eyebrow. Marcus Chen was legendary in certain circles. He had redesigned military communication strategies, developed breakthrough technologies that bridged impossible gaps. If anyone would understand the significance of her research, it would be him. "The quantum fluctuations aren't just surveillance," Alina explained, pulling up additional data on her tablet. "They're creating a map. But not just of our technological infrastructure. They're studying our communication patterns, our social interactions, our decision-making processes." Marcus studied the data, his fingers tracing the complex graph lines. "Adaptive intelligence gathering," he muttered. "But from where?" Their conversation shifted to a secure research lab, a neutral space Marcus maintained for cutting-edge technological development. Walls lined with advanced communication arrays, screens displaying global network traffic, quantum processors humming with potential. "Look here," Alina pointed to a series of microscopic data anomalies. "These insertion points, they're not just collecting data. They're testing our responses, like a predator probing a potential prey's defenses." Marcus's background in military strategy clicked into place. Reconnaissance, but on a quantum level unlike anything we've seen before. The research facility felt charged with potential. Outside, the world continued its daily routine, entirely unaware that something extraordinary was brewing. Quantum probes continued their silent work, believing themselves undetected. But Alina and Marcus had other plans. "We're going to find out who, or what, is watching," Alina said, her voice a mixture of scientific curiosity and emerging determination. "And we're going to make them wish they hadn't chosen Earth as their target." Marcus allowed himself a slight smile. The hunt was about to begin. Marcus Chen's private research facility looked nothing like a traditional laboratory. Nestled in the mountains outside Silicon Valley, it was a testament to technological innovation that defied conventional boundaries. Walls of advanced composite materials shifted color subtly, adaptive surfaces that could reconfigure themselves based on computational needs. "Traditional communication models are linear," Marcus explained, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "We're going to create something that doesn't just communicate, it evolves." Alina watched, fascinated. Their collaborative workspace was a fusion of her quantum theory and his strategic innovation. Screens displayed impossible data streams, mathematical patterns that seemed to breathe and change with each passing second. The core of their project was deceptively simple in concept, but nightmarishly complex in execution. They were developing a communication protocol designed to be fundamentally unpredictable. Not just encrypted, but mathematically impossible to fully comprehend. "Think of it like a language that rewrites itself," Marcus said, pulling up complex algorithmic models. "Every time an external system tries to parse our communication, the fundamental meaning changes." Their first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Alina's background in quantum physics provided the theoretical framework, while Marcus's experience in adaptive military communication systems offered practical implementation. The team Marcus had assembled was equally unconventional. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, a communication theorist who had spent decades studying linguistic patterns. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo, a computational linguist with a background in cryptographic systems. Each brought a unique perspective to their impossible task. "We're not just creating a communication system," Hiroshi explained during one late-night strategy session. "We're developing a living language, one that adapts, changes, and resists standard interpretation." Their initial tests were promising and terrifying. Computer systems designed to analyze their test communications would crash, unable to process the constantly shifting semantic structures. Traditional decryption algorithms became useless within milliseconds. Marcus understood the deeper implications. This wasn't just about defense. It was about demonstrating the fundamental unpredictability of human creativity. Each algorithm was a challenge to the notion that intelligence could be fully mapped or understood. The quantum detection array Alina had developed became their primary testing ground. What looked like random noise to any external observer was actually a complex communication system. Mathematical impossibilities became their primary language. Imagine trying to understand a conversation where every word changes its meaning the moment it's spoken, Alina explained to the team. That's what we're creating. Funding came from unexpected sources. Private tech companies, intrigued by the potential breakthrough. Government agencies that recognize the potential strategic value. Each contribution came with strings attached, but Marcus's careful negotiations maintained their research independence. Late one night, as the team reviewed their latest test results, something extraordinary happened. Their communication protocol began to show signs of emergent behavior, adapting in ways they hadn't predicted. It wasn't just a system they were developing. It was becoming something alive. "We're creating a language that thinks," Aisha whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of scientific excitement and subtle fear. Marcus looked at Alina, a silent understanding passing between them. They were no longer just researchers. They were architects of a new form of communication, a quantum rebellion against any system that believed humanity could be easily understood or controlled. Outside, the mountain facility hummed with potential. Quantum processors flickered with impossible calculations, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, something was about to discover that humanity was nothing like any species it had ever encountered before. The moment arrived on an unremarkable Tuesday, with rain pattering against the research facility's adaptive windows. Alina Rodriguez checked her systems one last time, her fingers moving with surgical precision across holographic interfaces. Marcus stood beside her, tension coiled in his shoulders like a compressed spring. "Transmission window is optimal," Dr. Aisha Okonkwo announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. The communication protocol they have developed wasn't just a message. It was a quantum-level linguistic bomb designed to break every conventional understanding of information transfer. The first whisper went out across multiple communication spectrums simultaneously. To any standard observation system, it would appear as nothing more than electronic noise, a random burst of data that meant absolutely nothing. But to the Krell Collective, it was something entirely different. Marcus had designed the transmission to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, mathematical equations that solved themselves and unsolved themselves in the same instant, linguistic patterns that changed meaning the moment they were observed. It was a message that was both present and not present, a conceptual trap designed to challenge the very foundations of an intelligence based on predictive analysis. In the Andromeda Galaxy, the Krell Collective experienced something unprecedented. Their vast neural network, a system that had processed countless civilizations' worth of data, encountered a communication that defied all established protocols of understanding. The quantum probes began to falter. Each probe was a fragment of the collective intelligence, designed to absorb and process information with perfect efficiency. But this message was different. It introduced variables that couldn't be calculated, meaning that shifted the moment it was perceived. "They're trying to process it," Hiroshi muttered, watching the data streams. Massive computational systems across the research facility tracked the alien network's response. What they saw was fascinating. The Krell-Thery's information processing began to slow, to stutter. Alina leaned closer to the monitors. "Look at the quantum interference patterns," she whispered. The probes were doing something extraordinary. They were struggling. Not failing, not breaking, but struggling to comprehend a form of communication that existed outside their understanding. It was more than a message. It was a conceptual challenge to the very nature of the Krell-Thery's intelligence. The transmission contained multiple layers of impossibility, mathematical equations that solved themselves in nonlinear ways, linguistic constructs that changed meaning based on the observer, quantum states that existed in multiple potential configurations simultaneously. "We're not just sending a message," Marcus explained to the team. "We're sending a cognitive puzzle, a communication that can't be fully processed by a linear intelligence system." Global communication networks began to show strange anomalies. Satellite communications flickered with impossible data patterns. Communication systems worldwide experienced micro-interruptions that lasted mere milliseconds, too short to be noticed by most, but significant to those watching closely. The Krell-Thery Collective had studied thousands of civilizations. They had observed the rise and fall of countless species. They believed they understood the fundamental patterns of technological development. But humanity was about to prove them wrong. In the research facility, the team watched in collective silence. Each monitor displayed complex data streams, a visual representation of the first true conversation between humanity and an intelligence that had never encountered true unpredictability. "First contact," Elena whispered, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "And we're speaking a language they can't understand." Outside, the rain continued to fall. The world remained unchanged, for now. But something extraordinary had just happened. Humanity had sent its first deliberate message to an intelligence that was about to learn a fundamental truth. Some systems cannot be understood. They can only be respected. The global military command centers transformed overnight. Gone were the traditional war rooms with their rigid hierarchies and predictable strategic models. Now they resembled advanced research laboratories. Spaces where scientists worked shoulder to shoulder with military strategists, where innovation became the primary weapon. General Catherine Rodriguez, Alina's older sister, stood at the center of this revolution. Her reputation for unconventional thinking had always set her apart from traditional military leadership. When Alina and Marcus presented their findings, Catherine didn't hesitate. "We're not preparing for a conventional defense," she announced during an emergency global security conference. "We're building an adaptive response system that thinks like humanity itself, unpredictable, creative, constantly evolving." Prototype ships began emerging from hidden shipyards around the world. These weren't traditional military vessels. They were living, breathing technological organisms designed to adapt faster than any computer could calculate. Each ship incorporated the quantum disruptive technologies developed by Alina and Marcus's team. International tensions dissolved in the face of the unknown threat. The United States worked alongside China. Russia collaborated with European nations. Technological innovations from India merged with research from Brazil. Humanity had discovered its most powerful weapon, unify purpose. Marcus's adaptive communication technologies became the backbone of this new approach. Ships could reconfigure their operational parameters in milliseconds, changing communication protocols, defensive strategies, and tactical approaches faster than any standard intelligence could predict. "We're creating a military system that doesn't just respond," Marcus explained to the assembled international team. "We're creating a military organism that anticipates, adapts, and fundamentally rewrites its own existence with each passing moment." Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura developed communication modules that could generate linguistic patterns capable of confusing any standardized intelligence system. Each communication became a complex puzzle, a message that changed its meaning the moment it was received. The ships themselves were marvels of technological innovation. Adaptive hull materials that could change molecular structure in response to external threats. Quantum-entangled communication systems that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Propulsion technologies that defied conventional understanding of physics. Alina's quantum detection technologies were integrated into every system. What looked like random noise to an external observer was actually a complex communication network, a way of sharing information that existed beyond traditional understanding. Training programs changed dramatically. Military personnel were now trained not just in combat, but in adaptive thinking. Psychological profiling emphasized creativity, spontaneity, and the ability to make decisions that defied predictable patterns. "We're not just building a defense," Catherine Rodriguez told her assembled commanders. "We're demonstrating the fundamental nature of human potential. Our strength isn't in our technology. It's in our ability to be beautifully, wonderfully unpredictable." Global research centers became conversion points. Universities redirected technological research. Private tech companies competed to contribute the most innovative solutions. What had started as a potential threat became a catalyst for human collaboration, unlike anything in recorded history. The first complete fleet prototype emerged from a joint international shipyard. It didn't look like a traditional military vessel. Its lines were fluid, its surface adaptive. Sensors and communication arrays seemed to breathe and shift, suggesting more organic than mechanical origins. During its first test flight, the prototype demonstrated capabilities that defied conventional understanding. It could change its operational parameters faster than standard tracking systems could register. Quantum communication arrays allowed it to exist in multiple tactical configurations simultaneously. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Krell Theory Collective continued its observation. But now, something had changed. The species they had considered a simple target for absorption was transforming, becoming something entirely unexpected. Humanity was no longer just preparing for a potential conflict. It was rewriting the fundamental understanding of what intelligent response could mean. The Kuiper Belt had always been a place of silence and darkness. Billions of kilometers from Earth, this distant region of icy bodies and cosmic debris would become the stage for humanity's first true encounter with the Krell Theory. Aboard the prototype vessel UES Horizon, Captain Amara Chen, Marcus's younger sister, watched the quantum displays with laser-focused intensity. The ship wasn't just a military vessel. It was a living system, its adaptive technologies creating a symbiosis between human intuition and technological potential. Incoming quantum signatures. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Alina's nephew, called from the communication station. The bridge crew moved with a fluidity that defied traditional military protocols. Each member was both a specialist and a generalist, trained to adapt faster than any standard military system could comprehend. The Krell Theory extraction mission appeared on their quantum adaptive sensors. To a traditional observation system, it would look like a simple geometric shape, a collection of interconnected technological components. But the Horizon systems saw something entirely different. Multiple layers of potential realities overlapped. The alien vessel existed in states of potential attack, potential defense, potential observation, all simultaneously. Traditional military strategy would involve choosing one approach. The Horizon did something else entirely. Captain Chen's command was unlike anything in military history. Adaptive Response Pattern Delta. She called out. The ship didn't just change its approach, it became something else entirely. Hull materials shifted molecular structure. Communication arrays generated linguistic patterns that existed in quantum uncertainty. Propulsion systems created movement patterns that defied standard physical understanding. The Horizon didn't just move, it danced. The Krell Theory extraction vessel found itself confronting an opponent that didn't follow any known rules of engagement. Every time their computational systems mapped a potential response, the human vessel would shift, becoming something else entirely. Weapons weren't just projectiles. They were quantum-entangled communication devices. Each potential attack carried multiple layers of meaning, A missile wasn't just a destructive object. It was a complex message, a linguistic puzzle that could reconfigure itself mid-trajectory. "They're trying to analyze our movement patterns," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his fingers moving across adaptive communication interfaces. "But we're generating responses faster than their computational systems can process." The battle became a complex mathematical dance. The Horizon didn't just defend, it communicated. Each movement was a message. Each defensive action was a linguistic challenge to the Krell-Theory's understanding of conflict. Quantum detection arrays tracked the engagement. Scientists back on Earth watched in real time as humanity demonstrated something fundamental: that intelligence isn't about predictability. It's about the ability to adapt beyond any standard understanding. The Krell-Theory vessel began to show signs of computational stress. Its systems, designed to process information with perfect efficiency, encountered something they had never experienced. An opponent that didn't just resist analysis, an opponent that fundamentally changed the rules of engagement with each passing moment. Quantum interference increasing. Lieutenant Rodriguez called out. The ship's systems were generating communication patterns that existed in multiple potential states. Each sensor reading was both a defensive action and a complex linguistic challenge. Captain Chen allowed herself the smallest of smiles. This wasn't just a military engagement. This was a demonstration of humanity's fundamental nature, the ability to be beautifully, wonderfully unpredictable. The Horizon moved like something alive. Its hull shimmered with adaptive technologies. Communication arrays generated impossible patterns. Propulsion systems created movement that defied standard physical understanding. In the vast darkness of the Kuiper Belt, humanity made its first true statement to an intelligence that believed it understood everything. "We are not what you expected." Elena Rodriguez's final creation was never meant to be a weapon in the traditional sense. The resonance algorithm was a communication protocol that existed at the bleeding edge of human understanding. A linguistic system so complex it could reshape the fundamental way intelligence processed information. The research facility hummed with an electric anticipation. Months of development had culminated in this moment. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura adjusted quantum stabilization arrays, his hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo monitored computational systems that seemed to breathe with their own consciousness. "We're not creating a method of destruction," Elena explained to the assembled team. "We're developing a way of communication that fundamentally challenges the nature of understanding itself." The algorithm was a masterpiece of linguistic and quantum engineering. Each transmission was a multi-layered puzzle, a communication that simultaneously existed and did not exist. Mathematical equations that solved themselves and unsolved themselves in the same instant. Linguistic constructs that changed meaning based on the observer's perspective. Marcus studied the final schematics, his strategic mind seeing potential far beyond a simple communication protocol. "This isn't just about sending a message," he murmured. "This is about forcing a complete reimagining of communication itself." Global communication networks became their testing ground. Satellite systems picked up transmissions that defied standard analysis. Quantum detectors registered impossible data patterns, linguistic structures that existed in multiple potential states simultaneously. The first full-scale test happened without fanfare. A transmission sent across multiple spectrums, designed to be detected by the Krell-Theory's quantum network. To any standard observation system, it would appear as nothing more than complex electronic noise. But to the Krell-Theory collective, it was something entirely different. Each layer of the transmission contained multiple levels of meaning. Linguistic patterns that rewrote themselves the moment they were observed. Mathematical equations that existed in states of perpetual potential. Communication that was both a message and the deconstruction of messaging itself. The quantum processors in the research facility tracked the transmission's impact. Something extraordinary began to happen. The Krell-Theory's vast neural network, a system designed to process information with perfect efficiency, began to slow down. Not fail, not break, but struggle. The resonance algorithm introduced a fundamental challenge to the collective intelligence. It was a communication that couldn't be fully processed, a linguistic structure that defied standard computational approaches. We're forcing them to think beyond their established parameters, Aisha explained, watching the computational tracking systems. Each transmission is a cognitive challenge, a way of communication that requires a complete reimagining of understanding. Global scientific communities watched in amazement. Military strategists recognized something fundamental was happening. This wasn't a traditional approach to conflict. This was a way of challenging intelligence itself. The transmission carried multiple potential meanings. Mathematical structures that solved themselves and unsolved themselves simultaneously. Linguistic patterns that changed meaning based on the observer's perspective. A communication that existed in a state of perpetual potential. Elena understood the deeper implications. They weren't just sending a message. They were demonstrating the fundamental nature of human creativity. The ability to exist beyond standard computational understanding. Intelligence isn't about perfect processing, she told Marcus during a late-night review. It's about the ability to adapt, to reimagine, to exist beyond established parameters. The resonance algorithm became more than a communication protocol. It was a statement, a challenge to the very nature of understanding, a demonstration that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology, but in its ability to be beautifully, wonderfully unpredictable. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Krell-Theory Collective encountered a form of communication that would force them to reimagine everything they thought they understood about intelligence itself. The unraveling of the Krell-Theory Collective began not with a catastrophic moment, but with a gradual disintegration of understanding. Their vast neural network, a system that had processed thousands of civilizations, encountered something it could not comprehend. Quantum communication arrays across the Andromeda Galaxy began to show impossible fluctuations. Data streams that had once flowed with perfect precision now fragmented, reconstituted, and fragmented again. The resonance algorithm introduced a fundamental challenge to their entire method of processing intelligence. Elena Rodriguez watched from Earth's primary research facility, her team monitoring the extraordinary phenomenon. Each quantum detection array told a story of something unprecedented, a collective intelligence beginning to question its own fundamental nature of existence. They're not just failing, Marcus observed, studying the complex data streams. They're being forced to reimagine their entire understanding of intelligence. The Krell theory had studied countless civilizations. They had observed species rise and fall, absorbed technological archives, mapped communication patterns with mathematical precision. Humanity was supposed to be another entry in their vast catalog of processed intelligences. Instead, they discovered a species that defied every established parameter of understanding. The first signs of fracture appeared in their peripheral quantum networks. Communication nodes began to generate responses that didn't align with the collective's core programming. Individual probe networks started to generate unique response patterns, a concept entirely foreign to the Krell theory's unified intelligence. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo tracked the disintegration with scientific fascination. They're experiencing something close to individual thought, she explained to the team. Our communication protocol is introducing a concept of individual variability into a system that has never understood individuality. Military vessels continued their adaptive approach. The UES Horizon and its sister ships maintained a defensive posture, their quantum adaptive technologies creating a living barrier that the Krell theory could not predict or comprehend. General Catherine Rodriguez coordinated the global response. This wasn't about conquest. This was about demonstrating a fundamental truth about intelligence itself. The Krell Theory Collective did not retreat in any traditional sense. They unraveled, a gradual process of systemic reconfiguration that challenged everything they understood about existence. Quantum communication networks began to generate response patterns that contradicted their core programming. We're witnessing the birth of something, Elena whispered, watching the data streams. Not the death of an intelligence, but its fundamental transformation. Global scientific communities watched in collective amazement. Military strategists recognized that humanity had achieved something extraordinary, a method of communication that was itself a form of defense. Each quantum probe began to generate unique response patterns. Communication nodes that had once operated with perfect synchronization now introduced elements of individual variability. The unified intelligence started to experience something close to individual thought, a concept entirely foreign to their previous existence. The resonance algorithm had introduced a fundamental challenge. It wasn't just a communication protocol. It was a way of understanding that celebrated unpredictability, individual creativity, and the beauty of imperfection. Marcus understood the deeper implications. Intelligence isn't about perfect processing, he explained during a global briefing. It's about the ability to adapt, to reimagine, to exist beyond established parameters. As the Krell Collective continued its extraordinary transformation, humanity watched. Not as conquerors, not as a species defending itself, but as witnesses to an extraordinary moment of cosmic understanding. The final transmission from the Krell Collective was unlike anything in recorded history. A complex, fragmented message that was simultaneously a surrender, a recognition, and in celebration of something fundamental. We are not what we were. In the vast darkness of space, humanity had demonstrated a truth far more powerful than any technological advantage. Some systems cannot be understood. They can only be respected. And in that moment of cosmic recognition, everything changed.